welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hello, listeners and friends. Welcome back to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm so excited that you are here for this week because I have a really special guest. Casey O'Rourke is a friend and a colleague and a mentor. I feel like, I've learned a ton from her, and I think you will in this conversation as well. She's a facilitator of personal growth and development, and her work encourages parents of teenagers to discover the purpose of their journey, while also providing them with tools and a shift of mindset that allows them to deepen their relationships with themselves and their families. She, like me, is a positive discipline follower. She began her positive discipline journey in 2007 and is now a lead trainer and a certified coach. Casey has led countless groups through workshops and classes that have left parents feeling empowered and excited about parenting. She also, and you'll hear her talk about this, has her own podcast, the Joyful Courage Podcast. It's fabulous. She has nearly 400 episodes and more than 1 million downloads. She also does live and online classes and individual coaching. Her first book, Joyful Courage, Calming the Drama and Taking Control of Your Parenting Journey, came out in 2019. And like me, she lives in the fabulous Pacific Northwest with her husband and her 2 kiddos, one of whom is 20 and one of whom is 17. In this conversation, Casey and I dive into what to do as parents when our teens or young adult children are making choices that we don't like, that are unsafe, that are dangerous, that have consequences they didn't anticipate, et cetera, right? How do we engage and how do we keep in relationship with those kids and not shut them down, but support them in a really heartful way? And this is not an easy thing to do as parents. And I think Casey's perspective on this, she's been through it. She's still going through it. I'm at the sort of beginning of that journey with my teen, and I find both her wit and her wisdom to just be so valuable in this space. Like some of the other conversations you may have heard on the podcast, this one comes with a content warning. If you've got kids or even teens around and or you yourself are uncomfortable with strong language, or even really frank discussions about some of the things facing our kids right now that may not be that fun to listen to, or maybe triggering for you, I just want you to be aware. We talk about sex, pornography, sexual assault, bad decisions, alcohol, drugs, all of those things. And if that's, not something that you want to dig into, then take a pass on this particular episode. But if you are okay with that strong language and agree, as I do, that this content is really important and these things are really important for us as parents to be talking about, this is the episode for you. Even if you don't have a teenager yet, and that's just around the corner, whether it's 5 years from now, 2 years from now, whatever it is, I think this conversation is so critical because before you get there, before you get to the space where your child is making decisions that you don't love, we have to think about how we're setting ourselves up for those in terms of the relationship that we are building with our kids. And Casey and I talk about it all. So without further ado, my friend, Casey O'Rourke. Casey O'Rourke, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I am thrilled to be here and really grateful to all your listeners for tuning in. I'm excited for our convo.
I'm excited too. And I'm also, this is a fun turn of events for me just because I've been on your podcast a couple of times and we're we're flipping that on its head. And now we get to talk about all the amazing things that you do and know. And so obviously, as I said in the intro, you focus or work primarily with parents of teens at this point.
Yes.
You didn't always do that.
No.
But you've got 2 teens or young adults now.
I do. 17 and 20. I actually have 1 teen that's official, which is wild. But I have 2 adolescents, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 2, you still have 2 young people who do not have fully developed brains yet.
100%. Yes, I do.
And I do as well. I have one teenager and 1 little. And so I'm a few years behind you, but we are, there's this crossover where we're dealing with, I suspect, a lot of the same challenges. So I want to kind of dig in here because the people listening who have teenagers or are anticipating those teenage years, we all know that teens make decisions that we as adults with fully developed prefrontal cortexes might not always love, might not always like, may have consequences that they didn't intend. And I want to talk about what do we do as parents and how can we show up heartfully when that happens. And I know you've had your kids do things. I have too. Mm-hmm. And I know many of the parents that you work with have. So let's start there. Like, what kind of things are we seeing kids do? And what do we do as parents?
Well, I don't want to traumatize your audience. However, there's no getting around brain development. There's no getting around it. So I'm so glad to have this conversation, Christy, because I feel like there's this idea out there that if we have the right parenting style and we have the right boundaries and we have the right relationship with our kids as they move into the teen years, that there's some magical way to avoid bad choices, risky behavior. And that, am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Yeah, that's bullshit. That's bad information. There is no getting around it. More likely than not, well, I would say 100%, you are going to have a teenager who does things that are going to leave you feeling like, what the fuck? What are you thinking? Right? It's inevitable. It will happen. Right? I mean, Don't you live with adults in your life who leave you feeling that way? People 100%. Are making stupid decisions all the time, myself included. And so, the first thing I want to say is that there's no parenting to avoid, teenage risk taking or novelty seeking, because they are wired to seek out sensational experiences, whether that is, jumping off a bridge into the river with their friends on a hot summer day, or driving their cars really fast, or hitting the vape pen, or trying weed, or drinking at a party. The kids, that's the way that their brains are wired.
Right.
And we can let them know our values, right? We can let them know our hopes and dreams around that, right? We can talk about risks. We can explore consequences that happen with certain decisions. But at the end of the day, our kids are walking out into the world and making in the moment choices. And it is more complicated than simply, well, you need to walk away if people are doing X, Y, Z, or you need to just say no. Because at the same time, their brains are wired for peer engagement, social engagement. They are wired to connect with their peers, to find belonging, right? They are wired for creative exploration and pushing up against, these are all pieces from Dan Siegel's Essence of Adolescence.
Yeah.
They are wired for this stuff. So while there are plenty of things to do and plenty of conversations to have ahead of the game, what I think is a place that is a gap for parents is what to do after your kiddo has made a really bad decision. And I am thrilled to talk about this because I have absolutely been there.
Yeah.
I've absolutely
I'm thrilled to talk about it too, because something you said really struck me. And that is we get sold this kind of bill of goods, if you will, that if we have the right parenting style and the right relationship and we do it right, and nobody can see me, but I'm putting that in quotation marks, right? That if we do it right, our kids will be okay. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't work to parent well, right? It doesn't give us carte blanche to go be shitty parents, but it's not this like bulletproof vest that protects us from all the things flying at us, right?
Right.
And I've been there too. In fact, just yesterday, I had a what the fuck moment with my daughter. Like,
oh, good. Yeah. Tell us.
I just kind of think we talk a lot about how to parent proactively, but that's all what you do beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in our judgy culture, we often look at those parents whose kids have made a bad choice, which is like every parent.
Yeah.
Ever.
Hello.
Right.
Welcome to the club.
Exactly. And then we say, well, that's because they didn't do X, Y, or Z, or that's a bad. And so those parents then get no support and no guidance in what to do after the fact, how we manage it when a child does something that we really wish they hadn't, or when they do something that they realize they really wish they hadn't done.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and yes. And there's this whole idea around wanting relationship with our kids, right? And I'm there. I'm sold, right? I've worked really hard to have a very open, honest relationship with my kids. And again, what that means is they have come to me with some pretty gnarly choices that they've made after the fact. I do not have kids that are like, hey, mom, I'm thinking about doing this thing. What do you think?
Right.
Unfortunately. I mean, we have loads of open conversation, but no, I don't have those kids. I have kids that say, okay, so I have to tell you something. And that's like code in my relationship with both of my kids to, okay, I'm going to feel my feet on the floor. I'm going to pull my shoulders back. I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to prepare myself because I have no idea what's coming at me. And it has been things like substance use. It has been things like sexual exploration. It has been big things that all of us are like, oh God, la, 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 la. But this is the deal. This is the deal with open, honest relationships. They're not going to go underground. They're going to come straight to you. And actually, what a gift, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
kind of a hard gift.
I know most of us as parents dread that moment, right? Where our kid comes and says, I don't know, used whatever. I used weed. I drank at this party to the point that I blacked out or whatever it is, right? Kids are doing all sorts of stuff and we dread that. But at the same time, I would so rather have my children be able to come to me and say, here's what happened. Or as you said, I have something to tell you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than to try to navigate those decisions entirely on their own. And not the decisions, they've already done that, but the consequences of those decisions entirely on their own. Because that's when kids get underwater, right?
Right. Like that's a really, listen, we can talk till we're blue in the face. Humans learn through experience. And I've got one kid in particular who's like, okay, well, let's just see. Like, I remember when she had just finished going to esthetician school, we were like, great, she's going to look for an esthetician job. She's like, actually, I think I want to work in a doctor's office, like in a receptionist office. And I'm thinking to myself, doesn't seem like a good fit to me. Like, you're going to be talking to people all day long. That is not your jam. But she would not listen. She had it in her head. It would be a certain way. She was about 6 weeks in and realized, oh God, I've made a big mistake. And she got to navigate things like talking to her boss, giving them a lead, having to work at the job until they found a replacement, having hard conversations. So she had to move through it to really experience what works for her. And both the kids, fortunately, unfortunately, there's been a lot of that in my house where it's like, well, I'm going to give this a try, see how it goes, and then bring it to mom after the fact. And I get to be, as best I can, in deep curiosity. So how do you feel about that now? What are you thinking about that now? Is it something that you're planning on doing again? How might you avoid it in the future if you don't want it to be a part, something that you choose into? What might happen if this gets out? Like, and, other kids or your coaches know that this happened. So and really, this is the key, and it is hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is hard.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to really practice neutral and just being very, very neutral, coming from a place of non-judgment. Because what I'm doing as I'm asking the questions is I'm hoping that I'm creating a situation where they are considering my questions, and those questions are sinking in to their brain so that when they're not in the house anymore, when they're in college or out on their own and they have not so great experiences, they can think to themselves, how do I feel about this?
Yeah.
Is this something that I want to avoid in the future? What might that look like? Where could I have chosen differently in the scenario going backwards that would have ended in a different result, right? Like, I want them to develop the ability to think critically about their own choices so that they actually can learn from it, hopefully quicker than I did, because I was not processing my choices as a young person, and college was a gamble. I somehow made it through, not addicted to anything, with no STDs and no unplanned pregnancies, which is a freaking miracle.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. And, I think a lot of us as parents, and I mean, this is my go-to reaction to, right? Like, without that sort of mindfulness piece that you mentioned, like when one of your kids says, Mom, I have to tell you something, that's your cue for like pulling your shoulders back, feeling your feet on the ground, and kind of taking a deep breath. I have to do that too, right? I have to practice the pause.
Yes.
My instinctual, natural reaction is judgment, anger, and that, as we both been saying, like the what the fuck kind of, right?
Are you kidding me?
Right. Are you kidding me? And I want to be clear, like, I have a 13-year-old. We're at the beginning of this, and her decisions that I don't like have been a real minor. I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, real minor, like clothing things that I don't like, or what, we're talking little things in the grand scheme, but I still can go really quickly to that. How could my child do that? Right.
Well, especially considering what we do for a living.
Totally.
Right. It's like that. There's that layer too of, oh my God.
Oh, for sure. Anyone in the parenting space, I think we can be super judgy of ourselves. Right. Like, I'm more judgy of myself than I am of, like, I'm really good at holding that non-judgmental space for my clients and the people but for myself, like, what did I do?
Yeah.
So, but for those parents who can relate to that, where they kind of immediately go to maybe the way they were parented, which is getting mad, frustrated, angry, judgy, maybe even punishing, right? How do we learn to take that pause? And you mentioned something that has become one of my very favorite parenting tools ever, which is leaning in from a space of curiosity. But not everybody knows how to do that, how to start with that, what that means. I'd love to have you talk about that a little bit more.
Well, I think before we can get to that curiosity, there is, like you called it, that pause. And I want to be really transparent too. Like, there was one instance where one of my kids shared something with me. We were in the car, and it came out really just one of those things that, as a parent, especially as a parent of a high schooler, you hope never to hear. And he said, "Hey, this is what went down." And I managed to stay really calm and ask questions. Tell me more about it. How are you feeling about it now? And I did say to him, like, I want to be really clear that this calm exterior is not what's happening on the inside for me. On the inside, I am like, holy shit, I'm really scared. What does this mean? and I just want to make sure that you know that. Like, I want to hold space for you. And this is really scary. So I want to say that.
Yeah.
There have also been times where I've heard news about things that my kids have done. And once everybody's calm, I'll lean forward and I'll take about 20 seconds to say, what the fuck were you thinking? I cannot believe you did this. I am so pissed right now. And then I pull back and I take a breath and I say, okay, just had to get that out. Just had to release that. Let's go into some problem solving, right? Let's figure out what we can
appreciate
do.
that reality check.
Yeah. I am not a fucking Buddha. Okay. I'm not that Zen. I try.
Good. And I'm not either.
Yeah. And the good news about like your experience with a 13-year-old versus, once you get into the later teens is she's giving you high reps. She's giving you lots of opportunity to practice when the mistakes aren't quite as crazy as they might be later on. So I think it's important for parents to hear that, just like when they're little and you decide in the morning, today I'm not going to yell today, and you make it till like 11 a.m. and you're yelling at your kiddo, just like that, the same is true in the teen years when you decide, okay, I am going to work on the pause. I'm going to work on being present and non-reactive. You've got to give yourself loads and loads of opportunity to practice when you don't need it, right? Which means, every time you walk through the front door, like stopping as an example, right? Feeling your feet on the floor, pulling back your shoulders, taking a deep breath, just coming into and intentionally experiencing that present, calm, connected nervous system body so that it is easier to access. It starts to become easier to access when you are losing your mind because you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, right? Then and it also requires a willingness too, because in that moment, I know it. Sometimes it gets the better of me. Definitely got the better of me the other night. We lean into that emotional fear, panic, and we come unglued. And that's the best way to make sure that your kid does not talk to you. Yeah. Because you can't handle it. You are proving with that response, not, oh, this is a really big deal and I should consider my actions better. No, what you are sending a message about is my parent, my mom, my dad cannot deal with having this conversation. So I've got to keep this hidden. I got to go underground. I got to turn to my peers, which they're also clueless. So not the greatest. So it's really important. That's what I'm driving home here. It's really important to do your work and practice that pause, right? Practice that centering. And when you do lose your shit, like I did the other night, also being willing to say, wow, last night, my fear, my panic got the better of me and I lost it. And I mean, I was reading out loud from a book about pornography and how it's basically ruined the sex lives of Gen Z.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm reading it out loud. And my poor husband and Ian both were my audience. They were passively my audience. And their response to what I was saying, I don't even remember what they said. All I remembered was I didn't like it. And so I doubled down. And I mean, I was coming from a place of, I hope my kids are never victims of sexual violence. I hope my kids are never perpetrators of sexual violence. It was so emotional. Yeah. Plus being a woman, and it was a nightmare. And I was sending a message specifically to Ian around, I know this is your experience and you are probably doing all the wrong things. And, like he was a robot who had been trained in sex through porn, right? Which is not necessarily true. So I had to clean that up. Yeah. Awkwardly. Yeah. And I'm going to have to work a little bit for him to trust me to have another conversation around any kind of relational sexual development, which, he's not a big fan of those conversations anyway.
Well, yeah. Most kids aren't. But what you're saying is kind of striking a nerve with me, because what it's highlighting is that it's not just when our kids make a choice that is, bad or unhealthy or unsafe. these kinds of emotional reactions from us come up in other spaces too, right? You were reading something.
Yeah.
They weren't even involved. And then suddenly you're, off the rails about this. And
so
then,
off the rails, Christy.
Right?
Like my husband sent me to bed. He's like, you need to go downstairs.
Like enough, mom. But, it also can come up like if our teenagers come to us with friendship issues and our hearts hurt for them. And so then, if something's happening and they've lost a friendship or they're not feeling connected to their peers, I hear that sometimes from my daughter. I hear that from other parents and, what they're experiencing. And those kinds of things, which don't necessarily involve a bad or risky choice, but that can send us into a place of fear and panic as well.
Right. And sending a message of, I can't handle this. I can't hold this space for you. I'm too uncomfortable with your discomfort. And this is life or death. I'm thinking about,
that's not an exaggeration.
No, it's not. I mean, if your listeners have not yet heard about the epidemic of teen boys getting targeted online to send sexts, to send nudes, and then extorted for money. This is happening. I guarantee you it's happening to at least one person in everybody's life. If it hasn't already happened to your kid, this is happening. And there are way too many stories where the boy does not feel like he can bring it to his parents. And the only other option that he sees is to take his life.
Yes. Yeah.
Our kids have got to know that they can come to us, and it has to be beyond lip service. We have to show them inside of every conversation that we're having with them that we can handle it, that we can hold them, that we aren't going to make them feel more shame or more humiliation or more fear or panic or whatever than they already feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think that is such an important thing to note. And again, not to traumatize listeners, but this is a reality that is happening. And, around the sexting and the nudes, but around other things too, where when kids don't have a trusted adult, and let's be honest, even sometimes when they do, but, this isn't meant to blame or shame parents, but especially when they don't feel like they have a trusted adult in their lives that they can go to with some of these challenges. Unfortunately, we are seeing a dramatic increase in suicidal thoughts, suicide attempts, and completed suicides in our teens because they don't feel like they have anywhere to go. It is life or death.
Yeah. It really is. It really is. And I, like I said, I've been through, I'm talking through experience here. And I am someone who lives and breathes and speaks and facilitates parent education.
Yep.
Right. And fortunately, I have a relationship with my kiddos where, like I said, they come to me. They don't come to me with everything, which would probably, developmentally, I don't know if that would be appropriate anyway. It's okay. Yeah. I know that they do their mischief and don't share with mom. Right. Okay. And I have to be okay with that. But yeah, it just, like I said, I feel like there's a gap in the conversation around this. And in a world where, it's not the same world that we were teenagers in. Even as I look back though, I was doing way riskier things in a different context than my kids. Right. And the access points that they have with interacting with the world through their screens. We really shit the bed with the screens, the adults.
Seriously.
God. Anyway, it matters. And I am not one that's like, let's freak everybody out. Let's doomsday the screen thing. It is here. It's here. I remember I did a podcast with my kids years ago. I was maybe 5 years ago. I had them in the closet with me, which is hilarious.
I feel like I remember listening to that one, actually.
Yeah. We talked about screens, and I was asking them, and I remember asking Rowan. Rowan might have been 14, so maybe it was 6 years ago. And I asked something about dick pics, and she was like, sorry, everyone. I hope that warning. Warning if you're listening with young kids. Rowan was like, oh yeah, it happens all the time. You just have to filter through. And my heart broke, that was just a thing that our kids have to navigate, that it's just something you have to navigate, right? And then the access to porn and the idea that, this book I was reading, the normalization of hetero anal sex as a thing that teenagers are doing. Like, no, this is not, no teenage girl is like, yeah, I'm into that.
Yeah.
Without the influence of pornography. Anyway, not to traumatize everyone.
Well, no, it's you're spot on. And actually a couple of weeks ago, we had Dr. Mandy Sanchez on the podcast from Culture Reframed, which is all about protecting our youth from the dangers of pornography.
Yeah.
And like you, Casey, anyone that works with me or has attended my classes or the Safe Parenting Summit, which I know you were a speaker in, I'm not about, fear mongering either. Like, I want us to feel informed and empowered. And there are things we need to know that are going on so that we can come from that place of empowerment.
Yeah.
Right. That we can step into that calm exterior, at least. If it's not a calm interior when we're interacting with our kids, because it is so critical that they feel like they can trust us.
Yeah. And I think there's this meme that shows up every once in a while on social media that I love, which goes something like, when my kid makes a mistake, rather than the first thing they think being, I'm going to be in so much trouble, I want the first thing they think to be, I got to call my mom.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's the goal. And if that is the goal, then they've got to know that we can handle it, that we can hold it, that even if we get a little ragey at the end of the day, like, I think Ian, my son in particular, he has a pretty high tolerance for me. And then is also willing to be like, why are you so pissed at me right now? 17 years of being in a relationship with someone, the kid knows me probably better than anyone else. He's been studying me all these years.
Yeah.
So I'm not perfect, right? Like, I definitely, and we talk about that too, as he gets older, he's a junior, he's going to be a senior next year. And as I think about him going away to college, I want to make sure he has a lot of room to choose things like, when is he going to come home? What does he have going on tomorrow? What might be the best course of action if he wants to see his girlfriend tonight, to make sure he also takes care of whatever he needs to take care of. So we have all these conversations, and I want his senior year not to be one of no rules, but I do want it to be one where he has the room that he needs to practice the freedom he will be stepping into when he goes away to school.
Well, and and I think that is such
and I'm controlling, so it's really hard.
Well, for sure. And I am too. And I also think, and you've mentioned like your own sort of college years and whatever, and
it's terrifying.
I had a high school upbringing where I wasn't really given that freedom. My parents, and I, adore my parents, but that was not the style of parenting back in the day. And you and I are the same age.
Yeah. Yeah. I got grounded a lot. Christy.
Yeah. And so then I got to college and suddenly it was like, woohoo, right? Like I had no
skills.
I had no skills for managing myself in that kind of an environment. And I definitely made some risky choices, some poor choices, I made mistakes. And I'm sure my parents sent me off to college and was like, she's a good kid. She'll be fine. She's right. She doesn't make these big mistakes like those other kids do. And lo and behold, it was just a matter of time.
Coming home with a 0.5 GPA, my second semester of my sophomore year, my parents were like, where did you go? I said, well, I didn't go to class,
Yeah. Well, I was that, and I'm like, I managed to keep my grades okay, but that was through a series of, exhausting myself because I was,
cramming all nighters.
And then making sure I could get to the next party.
Yeah.
Right. And so because and to this day, I still have FOMO. I was like, but it's a Thursday night and I might miss something that's going to happen. Right. So that was, that was my
or Wednesday
experience.
or Tuesday.
And I'll tell you, I did not call my parents to talk about any of the bad choices that I made or to get their help. And not because I didn't think not because I thought they didn't love me or wouldn't keep loving me, but because I don't believe I thought they could handle it.
I didn't think they could handle it. I didn't think that mine saw me. I felt like I wasn't who they wanted me to be. It was very clear what was valued. And I, I love my parents. I know this is my shit, right? But the message I received was, look, act, be a certain thing, and you have value. And when I kind of veered off into Grateful Dead kind of hippie land, my individuation really didn't happen until college because I didn't really have space to individuate in high school. I went to private school. I was kept under pretty good lock and key, even as I got into loads of mischief. It was just all really sneaky and getting caught. But for the most part, presented as pretty easy, good grades and good friends. But I was the wild one of my group, even in high school. And same story. College was crazy. And so, I think that's another thing to remember too is, and we aren't going to get it perfect. I know I send messages and, mistakenly to my kids, just like I did the other night to Ian. But the more intentional and conscious and aware we can be, the more reflective we can be without being crazy people. Right. But just because we're humans here to grow and develop, the more conscious we can be, the more opportunity we have to say, hey, I'm wondering if when I said this thing, if it felt like this to you. And I want you to know, here's where I stand on that. Right. Or I wonder last night or yesterday or last week when you told me this situation that came up with your buddies and I reacted, I was pretty emotional about that. I'm wondering, how did that feel for you? And what do you think I was scared of? Right? Like, I just feel like it's always an opportunity to tease apart the human experience that we're having.
Yeah.
And some kids, I'm thinking about listeners, thinking about people in my community who are like, yeah, that'd be great to be able to have that conversation. My kid does not open up like that. And that's okay too. It's okay. You get to keep opening the door.
Yeah, I think that's an important point is that if you have a kid who is a little more closed off or private, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've done something wrong.
Right.
It just might mean that's the personality of that kid. But it does still mean we have to keep showing up with the possibility and the opportunity and the openness so that when they do realize I can't handle this by myself, they know there's somewhere to turn.
Yeah.
And I think about those parents and like in that situation, if your kid doesn't come to you with a lot and then all of a sudden they come to you with a big thing and you have like no idea that stuff is happening, that is a time when it might be particularly hard to step into that calm space and that curiosity.
Yeah.
Because we'll be like, what? And yet almost more important because
they're
clearly something big enough that our kid has finally come to us. Right.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, because you initially had asked about curiosity and I kind of went somewhere else. Curiosity is not asking why. Like I would encourage all of you listening to just drop the why and instead lean into how, what, when, right? Because why? It's hard to ask, why did you do that? Why do you think that happened? With it not coming across as there's a right answer here. And if
judgment.
And if that's how the kiddo feels, that's not a safe step in.
Yeah.
So, if you can't stand it, just make sure you're asking why less often, right? And don't be surprised when they're like, I don't know. Because a lot of times when kids are in the thrill of the moment, they're dysregulated, right? Dysregulation isn't always just angry. Dysregulation is also when we're in euphoria.
Yeah.
Right. When we're having these big emotional experiences and we think, yeah, let's do that. That sounds like a great idea. Right. And then they're back to their logical brain and you ask the logical brain, like, why did you do that? They're like, I don't know. And that's the truth because they weren't connected to the prefrontal cortex. They were connected to the limbic system. And there's no logic there.
It's true for us as adults too, right? When we are dysregulated, if somebody asked me, like now in my rational brain, like why I lost my shit about something and why I said what I said when I was up, I don't know, because I wasn't rational. I wasn't in my rational brain. And I think we forget sometimes that our experiences aren't all that different from our kids, but we sort of put this boundary and really we get into those irrational dysregulated spaces too.
Yeah. One of my favorite back pocket comments, because there's a lot of times where it's like, oh God, I don't know what to say. And parents will say that to me, like, sometimes, I just don't know what to say. If you find yourself in that situation, one of my favorite things to say is, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Right? Tell me, that'll buy you some time. Plus, it'll give you some more information. You get to set the stage that I'm curious, I'm here, I'm non-judgmental, I want to know more. Like you're sending all sorts of messages with that one little statement. Yeah. So put that in your back pocket.
It's such a good one to have in your back pocket. And I have to tell you this story because just last night, my husband was working late. And so we have 3 dogs, which is ridiculous. In fact, one of them has been snoring behind me. So listeners, if you hear weird noises, my dog, but it's difficult to walk all 3 by myself. So my teenage daughter walked the dogs with me for our evening walk. And we were chit-chatting about a whole bunch of stuff. And we got into a discussion about social media. And the details of the conversation aren't really important. But at one point I said, tell me more about that, Mace. And she was like, yeah, what do you want when you ask that question? She's like, I feel like you're looking for
a ploy.
Answer. I was like, no, I'm just asking you to tell me more about it because I don't know kind of where your head's at.
Well, and that's
really,
a great
I
place.
use that question often.
I know. Well, and I think even that is a great place for us to laugh at ourselves and to look at our kiddos and say, oh, that's an annoying question to you. Like, that's my back pocket question, like we can keep it real too,
totally.
And I love doing that with my kids or saying something and realizing like, ooh, that rubbed you the wrong way. Like, tell me about why that bugged you.
Yeah.
Like, how can I do better? Like, I'm truly curious. Right.
Well, and I did laugh at myself. And at the end, as we were coming in the door, I was like, so honey, did I just ask you a bunch of questions that just annoyed you? And she's like, yeah, mom. I was like, sorry. So we kind of had a giggle about it.
My daughter and online dating, right? The dating apps, I am fascinated. And my favorite thing is when she's willing to, she's not on an app right now because she's dating someone, but when we can sit down on the couch and she lets me I can spend hours with her just going through swiping. What do you think about, ooh, why do you like that guy? Ooh, he's kind of old. Ooh, right? Like having those conversations were side by side. I get to ask her, like, what is it? Why is he a no? Why is he a yes? What is it about the profile that you like? And it's so fun. And the same with their, granted, I will say it was only recently that she was driving me somewhere and I had her phone in my hand and I was looking at something and she said, God, this is the first time ever that you holding and looking at my phone isn't giving me a panic attack. I was like, oh, progress. Not because she had crazy things on her phone, but just I mean, she would get so tweaky if I was picking up her phone. She held that close. She was like a poker player.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I think, I love this conversation. And I just keep coming back to this place of whatever your back pocket question is. And the one, tell me more about that, is actually a great question. It just happened that last night it was irritating my kid. But like whatever that back pocket question is, or whatever questions you kind of dig into, aside from the why the fuck did you do that? That place of curiosity is, and I said this, or it's become one of my very favorite, if not my favorite parenting tool, because it helps ground me right.
Yeah.
And there are times when my husband will even remind me, and I'll be like, babe, let's go in with curiosity here before. Right. And that has been sort of my cue, just remembering that word, even to do the shoulders back, feel the ground, take a deep breath kind of moment, that my choice here is curiosity and connection, or judgment and shutting down. And when I can remember, I will always choose that curiosity and connection piece.
Yeah.
I don't always remember, but I try. Yeah. Casey, I am so grateful to you for having this conversation and sort of shedding some light and some reality on what parents and teens are dealing with right now. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me in all the places. I'm joyful_courage on Instagram. Joyful Courage is the name of my podcast. So you can listen to my show, which Christy's been on, anywhere you listen to this show, including my website. The website where you can find me is besproutable.com. And you can get to the teen stuff by /teens. So besproutable.com/teens. That's the company that I'm a founder with my partners, Julietta Skoog and Alana Beebe. I have a free Facebook group where we talk about all this stuff called Joyful Courage for Parents of Teens. Joyful Courage is on Facebook as well. And
awesome.
Yeah, those are the places.
We will make sure that all of those links are in the show notes. And I will just say, I am in that Facebook group and I learn so much.
It's so good. I'm so proud of it. It's such a compassionate, vulnerable space. I'm really proud of all the parents that are in there.
Yeah. As you should be. Thank you for being here and being on the Heartful Parent Podcast. And I know we'll talk again.
Totally. Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners.
Oh, y'all, I hope you got so much out of that conversation with Casey. I know I did. I learned something new from her every time she and I talk, whether it's me being on her podcast or her now making her first appearance on the Heartful Parent Podcast. There's just good, heartful stuff there to dig into. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you are getting value out of this podcast, do me 2 favors. 1, share it with another parent. Let them know that you've stumbled upon a resource that is valuable to you and that they might get value out of. And 2, I always appreciate those reviews. I read them. I work hard to make this the best podcast and get the best content out there for you that I can. So like it, subscribe it, give it 5 stars, share your thoughts. Love to hear them. Thanks so much. And I'll see you next week with another episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. See ya.